Tervetuloa. Tervetuloa kaikille. Koittakaa löytää paikat, jotka ette ole vielä istumassa. Tyhjiä paikkoja löytyy, tuolla on tuon ikkunan lähellä ainakin löytyy. Ja joo, tuossa tuli hyvä muistutus. Tervetuloa kaikille Zinzinon järjestämälle erikoisluennolle, joka on suunnattu urheilijoille, valmentajille ja liikunta-alan ammattilaisille. Meillä on tänään 2 luentoa, tässä on ensimmäinen ja myöhemmin sitten tauon jälkeen tulee toinen, joka on suunnattu terveydenhuollon ammattilaisille. Mun nimi on Juuso Kääriä ja mä toimin Zinzinon itsenäisenä edustajana ja mä kerron näin alkuun pari käytännön asiaa ja sanon muutaman sanan meidän vieraspuhujasta. Ihan ensimmäisenä mulle tultiin just tuossa muistuttaa, että jos teillä on autoparkissa täällä, niin se pitää olla ilmoitettu sitten tuohon respaan, se rekkarinumero. Just tajusin, että mä en ole ilmoittanut, koska sinne tulee sakko, jos ei ole ilmoittanut sitä. Niin ai jaa, apilla voi maksaa. No niin, mahtavaa. Okei, hyvä. Eli tänään luento kestää kello 16 asti ilman taukoja ja lopussa sitten kun meidän vieraspuhuja on lopettanut, on mahdollisuus esittää kysymyksiä. Niille, jotka jää myöhemmälle luennolle myös, niin taukoa vietetään tämän jälkeen toisessa kerroksessa. Ottakaa tavaranne mukaan, tyhjennetään tämä tila, niin saadaan vähän ilma vaihtumaan ennen seuraavaa osiota. Meillä on tulkkausohjeet, jotka löytyy tuolta takaa myöskin, eli pidetään englanniksi, tulee tämä luento. Tulkkausohjeet, eli kun laitatte puhelimen selaimeen ton bit.ly/event-tulkkaus, niin silloin pääsette kuuntelemaan tulkkausta. Anna Ojapalo toimii meidän tulkkina tänään. Ihanaa ja terveisiä Annalle sinne tulkkaukseen. Sitten vaihdetaan kieltä, jotta meidän vieraspuhuja tietää, mitä hänestä sanotaan. So let's change into English so our guest speaker understands what is said about him. Welcome to a special lecture for athletes, coaches and sports professionals. Our guest speaker has been involved in human performance and sports science his entire professional career. He has worked in every aspect of strength and conditioning in countless sports at national and international levels of competition. He has tested and coached Olympic athletes at 4 Olympic Games, Beijing, London, Rio de Janeiro and Tokyo, and worked with Premier League football teams, the national football team of England, and national as well as international rugby teams. As an environmental physiologist, he has studied the functioning of the human body in extreme conditions and helped individuals achieve extraordinary goals, such as climbing of the top of Mount Everest, rowing the Atlantic Ocean, crossing the Sahara Desert, and traveling to the North and South Poles. He is an exercise and nutrition scientist with over 30 years of experience in elite sports, clinical physiology, and sports science research. He is an accredited strength and conditioning coach, accredited kinesianthropometrist, difficult word, and qualified nutritionist, equipping him with an all-round knowledge and understanding of how best to develop people along the road of their health and fitness goals, as well as athletes. He has studied at Oxford, Liverpool, Glamorgan, and Liverpool John Moores universities, and is currently a visiting professor at the University of Central Lancashire. He also works at Zinzino as the Chief Product Officer, making sure that science and the highest possible quality are at the basis of what we do. He is well published amongst the peer-reviewed scientific literature and has authored and co-authored leading impact papers on nutrition, chronobiology, athlete preparation, and the changing state of health in Western industrialized nations. From clinical rehabilitation right up to elite sports performance, He has worked with an extremely broad range of athletes and individuals. Today, he is best known for linking the evidence base of elite sports science and clinical health practice to everyday exercise, activity, and nutritional behavior. I myself admire his scientific background and experience, and especially how he is able to convey his expertise as a performer on stage. Not your everyday scientist, but a world-class expert with an edge. So, a lot said. Take out your notebooks, and we're very honored and happy to have you today here. Dr. Colin Robertson.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all. This seems really loud. It's not just me, that's really loud, isn't it? That's better. I mean, first of all, it's a real privilege to be here. And I can't believe I've nearly been at Zinzino for 5 years. And I can't believe it's taken me this long to make my way to Finland. I don't know why it's taken so long. But it's nice to be here now. Whenever I see a picture used, I look and see, is it the same shirt and jacket? It's not. The jacket might look the same, but I promise you it's not. And it's definitely a different shirt. I do have a tendency to wear the same things a lot. But no, it's a privilege to be here. And I've only got one more Scandinavian country to visit now. And then I've done them all. And it seems to be that they're just getting better and better. So this morning, we're going to talk about sport. So let's start off with exercise. And I don't know about you, but that noise is like, it's not, I'd be better without this. I could talk. I'm loud. I'm from Ireland and Scotland. We're known for being loud. Let's start with exercise. So I arrived, the plane touched down around about 12:30 this morning. And I managed to get to the hotel for just after 1 o'clock in the morning. And so then I was in bed and trying to get to sleep from around about 2 o'clock. And all I could think about was setting the alarm clock to get up and go for a run, so that I can get my first glimpse of Helsinki. It's a brand new place. I've never been before. I've been told how beautiful it is. And so sure enough, this is the truth. I was so excited about the prospect of getting up to go for the run that I couldn't sleep. So I was just lying there, because the hotel was quite nice. I was lying there thinking, I wonder what it's going to be like. And I've seen photographs. So eventually I gave up on trying to sleep. I got up, put my things on and set out and just started to head into the city centre. And it did not disappoint. It is absolutely jaw-droppingly gorgeous. It is by any standard. What a beautiful city. And I was able to run around it and cross a few bridges and go along the waterfront and then get back to the hotel. And thankfully in the hotel, they've got a nice little gym downstairs. So I was able to go into the gym and have a little bit of a strength session as well, so that you can get some energy for the day. And because I knew I was going to come and talk to all you people, and actually talk to you about one of my favourite subjects, which is sport, I was thinking more about the statistics as they are in the world with regards to exercise behaviour, nutritional behaviour, physical activity. And where do you position yourself if you do certain things, if you have certain habits? And before we even get to the end of this talk, we're going to talk a lot about nutrition and how what we do powers sports performance and how we can benefit our overall health with that. But I would imagine everyone in the room has got some interest in health. Is that true to say? And I would hope everyone in the room has some interest in fitness, because they're really good friends. They're really compatible. But do you know that if you are, for instance, if you spend 10 minutes a day reading a book, reading an article, 10 minutes a day, do you realize that puts you in the top 1% of all people in the world who read regularly? So if you want to develop superhuman powers, and you want to put yourself in the categories whereby you're kind of optimizing the experience and developing yourself, it's not about reading a book every week. It's not about, reading 100 pages every day. Literally, if you spend 10 minutes a day, you're in the top 1%. And then imagine what happens then if you double that. Let's say you spend 20 minutes. And let's say we go 3 times. That's 3x it. And you do 30 minutes a day of just doing a little bit of reading of something that you're interested in for your self-development. Or even, let's say you read some fiction. You might think, well, it's just entertainment. It's not. It's language. And whenever you read, you start to develop your language in a different way. And we have a phrase which is that someone speaks as though they read a lot. Do you have that phrase over here? So we use it quite a lot back in the UK and Ireland. Someone speaks as though they read a lot. And it has an impact on who and what you are. So where am I going with this? So today I'd spent a combined, in the morning, hour and 3 minutes doing exercise, which is very typical for me on any day of the week. Does anyone know what percentage of the global population that puts me in? Anyone want to hazard a guess? 10% a day reading puts you in the top 1%. So where do you think an hour a day of exercise puts you? 0.001. Now, you don't need to, I don't want to be flattered. You don't need to tell me anything that's not true. Let's all just agree. I don't look like a superhuman. I'm not going to be in the next Marvel film, running down the road in Lycra. I'm nothing exceptional. I don't walk down the high street. People don't stop and go, oh my God, look at this human being. This person's incredible. I just look like anybody else. I look as normal as anyone else. And yet, all of the characteristics of my health, my well-being, put me in a decidedly different category to the vast majority of the population. So if you do 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, which is the current recommended guidelines that we tell everybody, what percentage does that put you in? I'll give you a clue. He said it a moment ago. 0.01. So we go around the world, we write research articles upon it. There are gyms everywhere. Everywhere I go in the world, I'm looking for sports centres and gyms and fitness centres. And from the drive from Helsinki just through to here, I saw countless of them. There's gyms everywhere. I was told by my fantastic tour guide about the open outdoor pools, and some of them are heated and some of them aren't. There's trim trails, there's tracks. And yet, a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the global population do the minimum of what we recommend them to do. It's interesting, isn't it? And I don't think I've told you anything so far that you don't already know. Are you all aware that the guidelines are 30 minutes a day, most days of the week? Yeah? Moderate. So no one wants you to break yourself. Just moderate exercise. So now, with honesty, and I know whenever someone like me asks a room like this question, 80% will lie. But I want you to all be honest. How many people in the room get at least 30 minutes, 5 days a week, every week? And now people looking around going, hold on, I don't want to be the one with my hand down. So what I want you to do now is everyone else look around the room, and I want you to think of something. You're not normal. None of you are normal. You're really not. And why? Because you're here. You're interested enough in health and fitness and well-being to spend your Friday listening to somebody like me. Most people don't. Most people are thinking, it's Friday. When do we finish? I can taste the first drink right now. Hopefully I can finish early. Look at the weather. I mean, I live in the UK. We get better weather than you, but we don't get great weather. So I know what this means to you. And remember, I was brought up in Ireland. We get the worst weather. So I know what this means. And yet here you all are. And in this room, if you looked around then, some of you were definitely telling the truth. I'm not going to say anybody's a liar, but some people weren't telling the whole truth. It's a bit like when I do a nutrition consultation and I say, tell me what you eat. And people go, oh, I eat asparagus and apples and vegetables and yeah. And then once we're an hour through the consultation, they go, oh yeah, and I have a cake. Of course I do, and a chocolate bar every day, and I like to have some sweets. And oh yeah, and we go. So, the truth, we get there eventually. So in this room of people who are far more focused on health, on their well-being, health and fitness, we still don't have every hand in the air, confidently going, of course I do that. And that's because action is informed by knowledge, but knowledge is not the catalyst for action. Knowing is not enough. Knowing is never enough. Action takes implementation. Action is based on habits, it's based on discipline, it's based on achievement. If you can adopt a mindset where achievement in itself is the satisfying part of the process, then you've got some idea what it's like to work with or be an elite athlete. And I've spent 30 years working with elite athletes at every level you can imagine. From children who are identified as having talent, and we bring them onto what we call pathway, and we start to invest in those children, and we give them good coaches, and we get them involved in a competitive structure, and we advise their families and the children about nutrition, and we develop them and we watch them. And as the years go by, that group gets smaller and smaller every year. What do you think makes that group smaller? Why do you think there's less children every year? Why don't we have 5,000 people who could go and run the 100 meters in the Olympics? No ideas? Okay, I'm up here for 2 hours. If it's just me talking, it's never going to work. Okay? I know that some of you just need to get a bit more confidence to answer a question. By the way, I've taught in huge universities. I still teach now at university. I've attended huge scientific conferences, medical conferences, and I don't know how many Zinzino events I've done. And it's always the same. When someone like me stands at the front and asks a question, everyone does that. Or pretends they're thinking, yeah, I wonder, yeah. And thinks, don't make eye contact. Or if they do, they then get scared and they feel locked in. Like, now I can't look away. Oh no, don't pick on me. So listen, I'd rather you said something and got it wrong. At least we can have a laugh and we can then move on to the answer. But why do you think? We get all these children, they're on pathway, we're giving them the best coaches, we're giving them nutrition, we're getting them involved in competition, and year on year, that group gets smaller. And the next group is coming through, and the next group is coming through. Why do you think that is? Yes, so that's a huge part. For a lot of people, it's the discipline. Go on. I think from a societal point of view, that could well be true. But what I'm talking about is we have what's called the GAT, the gifted and talented. So the ones who the schools and the clubs say to us, these people are really good, and we look at competition, they get recruited. And then we give them access to the best facilities, and they are encouraged to train and participate as often as they can. So for this is the group I'm talking about. You've partly said it, it's tough. And so everyone wants it until doing it becomes the reality. It's hard. It's really hard. Imagine if you're a swimmer. The first ever youth development group I worked with were swimmers. Swimming is brutal. It certainly is in the UK. We've got 10-year-olds who are expected to be at the pool before school at 5 o'clock in the morning. That means they're getting up at 4. Then they come to the pool, they do a 2-hour session in the pool, then they have breakfast, which we've told them to eat, then they go to school, do a full day at school, do their training, their fitness training, and then come back to the pool in the evening at least 4 times a week. And then at the weekend you'll do galas, you'll compete at regionals and nationals. It is brutal. And kids like to have fun. And their friends are having parties at the weekend. And their parents, like people like all of us, they go, how many years have I got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get them to the pool? So there's lots of challenges, and it's hard. And then there's the competition. The biggest thing that separates is the competition. Year on year, we're only interested in the best. I know now, so forgive me. I know everybody likes to say, well done, you tried your best. The main thing is that you took part. That's the 21st century motto, isn't it? Yep. No? Yes? Yeah? You hand up at the back.
About you maybe know Jari Litmanen, football trainer
No.
and player. Some years ago, playing in Liverpool also, and he's from here, Lahti, and I know he trained in the morning about half minutes 30 minutes before school and also in afternoon. And he is doing just what you are talking about.
Well, I mean,
It comes a habit and daily training.
it does, and it does across sports. But the point I use swimming because swimming's particularly extreme. It happens across all sports. Sport and its requirements for training is really, really demanding. But the point is, and even in football, I've worked in big football clubs and small football clubs. The point is society is out of touch with professional and competitive sport. And maybe it's different in Finland, but everywhere I go in the world, people are giving children medals just for taking part. They go, well done. You took part, that's the important thing. And that's nice, it's lovely, very nice. But it's got nothing to do with sport. At sport, we assess you every month. And we assess you every competition. And we take you off. Because it costs money, and it costs time, and it's resources. And there might be a child who can compete better and win more trophies and win more medals. And what we're looking for are people who will eventually go to the Olympic Games and bring home a gold medal. And you just being nice and taking part isn't good enough. So sport breaks people's hearts 24 hours a day. And can you imagine how excited a child is to be told you've been selected? You've been selected to be a part of this Olympic pathway. And then the reality kicks in. The early morning training, the after school training, the diet, which we're going to come to. People like me, and this is a true story, what I would do, and the last time I did this was not so long ago, is that a person's child gets selected for what we call a pathway. So now they have the potential, if they can cope with all of this, to one day represent their country. And so we get the best trainers, we get physiotherapists, we get everything in place, and you might end up with me as your nutritionist. But I know that child doesn't make choices about what they eat. You do. And that child's habits are all influenced by you. But now we want to give that child the best possible chance to become the best at what they do in the world. So my habit in the morning or in the day of an hour of exercise puts me in the 0.001 category. What percentage of the global population do you think end up taking a medal home from the Olympics? 0.0000001. That's the global population of Olympic medal holders. Way, way beyond what we do. And it's tough. And so what I would do is your child gets selected and everyone's excited and thinks this is fantastic, and they start picking the dream car and holiday because they can imagine all the money and the fame and the success. and I come and knock on your door, say, hello, my name's Dr. Colin Robertson, and I'd like to see what you've got in your fridge and your cupboards, please, because your child now belongs to us. They might, in 15 years' time, win a medal. So we need to think about what they eat now. So what's in your cupboards? And you see white faces. What? Oh, we don't normally buy that. That's just, no, we don't normally have this. They wouldn't be there normally. Can we go in the fridge? Oh, what's this big 2-litre bottle of Coke? Oh, no, we don't normally have that. That's just for, nothing's ever normal when I show up. It's never normal. I've always, no matter how many times I've done it, which is hundreds, I always land on a non-normal day. When I was working in the hospital with people who have to have surgery, to have life-saving operations, and I've got to help them to lose weight so it's safe enough for them to have an operation. And we start to talk through their week. Yeah, but Tuesday wasn't normal. I wouldn't normally do that on a Tuesday. And Wednesday was the neighbour's birthday, so we had pizza. And then Thursday, well, the child came home from school and, they'd had a tough day, so we went and we had some ice creams. And, well, Friday, well, we always go to McDonald's on a Friday, just once a week. And Saturday goes on and on and on. And athletes are normal people from the normal world. And so their diet, when they begin, and often as you're managing it through, is very similar to how most of the world eats. And the way most of the world eats is not great. We'll talk about that in other sessions. So what we have to do first of all with our athletes is establish what we would call a healthy diet. That's the first thing. It's not about supplementation, it's about what can we do with the diet. And so what I'm going to take you through, let's get rid of that and that, is we're going to get through to not only how does nutrition power sports performance, but specifically how does Zinzino help to power sports performance. And I don't know if it's coincidence, but since I joined Zinzino, the number and the status of the sports teams, individuals that have come on board with Zinzino has gone up and up and up and up. So there are more and more elite athletes, professional athletes who are coming to Zinzino all the time. And we have some huge clubs, like for those of you who have we got any football followers, fans in the room? Just 2. Okay. That's unusual. It's a global sport. It's the biggest single sport on the planet. But two people in Finland like it. That's okay. That's okay. I know you're good at hockey. I know you don't have an alarming track record in football. But when I go to the US and talk about football, they can name every Premiership team, and they often wear the tops, and it's the same wherever you go. Unfortunately for me, I come from the city that has the single best team in the world. But just down the road from us, there's another city called Manchester. And one of their big clubs called Manchester City has been using Zinzino products now for the past 5 years. And just as a point, because people always say, how did you get Manchester City to come to Zinzino? Are you aware, first of all, that Manchester City use our product? So and it's grown year on year. And I know Tom is, he's quite high up in the organisation. He won't mind me talking about this. So they started off just using it with the first team, so the really famous ones. And then they said, we need to actually get the second team to be using this as well. And then they said, well, we need the women's team to be using this as well. And then they said, well, actually, what we need is for the academy to be using this as well. So every year, their order has just got bigger and bigger. And so people often say, how did you get Manchester City to come to Zinzino? So do you want me to let you into the secret? No? All right, I'll just move on then. No, forget it. No response, you're not interested. I'll tell you the next time. Do you want me to tell you? It's more like it. So, it was really, really simple. I'll tell you what happened. The phone rang. I went, hello? And he went, hi, my name's Tom. I'm the head of nutrition at Manchester City. I said, hi. He said, "You've got the best omega-3 in the world and we'd like to buy some." So, okay. That's how it happened. So you see, it was really tough. And that's pretty much how it works across the board. We don't pay any athletes. If you get on a ambassador thing for Zinzino, you have to just want the products, and at best we will give you the products because you have to believe in the products. But we don't pay anyone to represent us. We don't promote ourselves. Those things, athletes come to us, and we've got more and more. And nutrition, I mean, let's get real. You are what you eat. So when it comes to sport, it's the same as when it comes to life. Nutrition is not just the first step in health. It's the first, second, fifth, 10th, 100th and last step in health. You are what you eat. And I mean that literally. I want you to think about this. Every single part of your body is made up of the substances you consume. Literally. From those proteins to those fats. When we start to look biochemically at those vitamins and minerals, when we look at even carbohydrates, which are power in each one of those cells, you are what you eat. And so the quality of you and the quality of your health is totally highly correlated with the types of foods that you consume most regularly. That's how you influence who and what you want to be. When it comes to sport, nutrition in sport is immense. It literally is. Getting the nutrition right is a fundamental game changer in sport. Making sure that they've got sufficient amounts of all the right types of nutrients to fuel the sport, and most importantly, to recover and to adapt. And so when we power sports through nutrition, it's literal when we start to think of the energy needs, and it's literal when we think of making people the athletes they need to be in order for them to do exceptional things. And the one thing I've learned by being around elite athletes for such a long time is that they're not normal either. To the extent now that I can see potential in a young athlete, and I can see potential in what we call a breakthrough athlete. It stands out miles. I can see the difference in them now because they're not normal either. It's all those different things in how they conduct themselves, the extent they're prepared to go to, the attention to detail they have produces maximal potential in the individual. And so when it comes to sport, what do? There's a famous cycling coach called David Brailsford. He's actually called Sir David Brailsford now. And he made the world aware of a principle that was been used in sport for a long time, but he became really famous for it. And you might have heard of it. It was called marginal gains. Have you heard of this principle? Yeah? Because you can apply this to your life. By the way, everything I say in this whole talk, you can apply to your life. Because humans are humans, and we can all benefit from taking part of this. But marginal gains is a game changer. And it's where you recognize you won't make a 100% improvement in one area. But if you can identify 100 different things and make a 1% change in those, then you get a net 100% improvement. And David Brailsford, he took this to the extreme. I remember when we were flying out to Rio for the 2016 Olympics, every Team GB athlete had their own pillow that they specifically knew they liked, duvet for the bed. There was all kinds of individual things so that when they went there, their room could be made perfectly for them. Every single athlete was on an individualized nutritional program. There was even down, literally, to the types of toothpaste that the individual athlete would use. Because if you can make those 1% gains, then you can make a huge gain overall. And so when I get given an athlete or a group of athletes, I start to think, okay, what's the demand of the sport? And what can nutrition do measurably to make a change to their performance in that sport? How can I give you back a better athlete? And so what we're going to go through is looking at this. So this is what sports nutrition is. I don't like slides. I only put slides together because people expect them. I'd rather do presentations without them. So I'm not going to read that to you. That's there so that people can do what you're doing and go, bing, take a picture, and you can read it yourself. Because I think the most patronizing thing a presenter can do is go, so, sports nutrition is a specialized field of nutritional science that focuses on the dietary, blah, 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 blah. So it's there for you, and then you can put it in Google Translate, and you can have it in Finnish or whatever country's language you prefer. But the reason why I do want to draw your point to this, so it's necessary to support athletic performance, optimize recovery. So, what do you think exercise does? There's a question.
It breaks muscles.
It breaks muscles. Perfect. So we break down muscle tissue. Okay? And then the body has to do what? Yeah, it has to recover. It has to repair that. So why does that lead towards bigger muscles? Why does that lead? Resilience, that's a different component. But why, if you break the muscle down, and then the body goes, right, I need to repair that, you've broken it, why does it make it bigger? Why? Why not just repair it? So it's what we call super compensation. So you said overcompensation. So we call it super compensate. But the reason why the body overcompensates or super compensates is not because it thinks we want to be big, because that's really inefficient. It's really inefficient. Why do you think that when you've been doing exercise, let's say you've been starting to run, and you start to run regularly, why do you think your resting heart rate, just sitting here now, why do you think that gets lower? Why does it affect that?
Well, the heart is stronger and is pumping more oxygen through your body with one beat, so it has to beat less when you're resting.
Perfect. The system has become more efficient. So the body is always trying to adapt to be more efficient. So the reason why the muscle gets bigger is simple, is that we call this CSA, cross-sectional area. And it's what we call an acute or an immediate response. So if I go to the gym and I do some bicep curls and I tear little micro tears in this muscle, the message says, okay, we went strong enough to do that. And the easiest thing to do is repair and be a little bit bigger. Because the bigger the cross-sectional area, the greater force I can produce. So it makes it more efficient. It's based on an efficiency. And then what happens is you go back to the gym and you pick up a heavier bar and you do it again. The body goes, right, okay, got to do that again. And so adaptation is all about efficiency. How can we efficiently do this? And that's why the first changes are to the muscle. The body goes, don't worry, we'll just get a little bit bigger. And it happens in the session. Anyone who goes to the gym, what happens in the session? What happens to your muscles? They get tired, but why does everyone share gym selfies? It's because they pump. Yeah, it's the best time, isn't it? Yeah, I'm just leaning against this. Yeah, because the muscle pumps. Even immediately in the session, the fluid in the muscle pumps to create force right there and then to cope. And then the message gets through that says, okay, this needs to be bigger. But bigger muscles are made of what? What are muscles made of? Amino acids, which are proteins. Yeah. And so the body goes, right then, I need to build more things. And so if it builds more, it costs more from an energy point of view. So then you have to consume more. So you have to address the protein, you have to address the energy to maintain the muscle mass. So there's lots of things that happen to develop this new level of efficiency. The fittest people you know, the fittest people we know, are really just hyper-efficient human beings. When they exercise and they run or they cycle or whatever it is they do, their heart rate can go to such a high level, they can cope with so much stress because of efficiencies, because of what they can cope and tolerate with. It's a strengthening of the cardiovascular system. And then the benefit of that to our health is that when you're rested and you're settled down, the body is so efficient They're actually normal things: going for a walk, taking your children to school, going shopping, cleaning the house, sitting here listening to a madman from Ireland. It's really easy. Your heart rate's not under stress at all. And so when we look at this, optimizing recovery, we need to optimize recovery from life, not just from sport, from day to day. And to promote long-term health in physically active individuals. That's what sports nutrition is. And so, why do we do it? It's that we take an evidence-based approach. So we're not influenced by adverts, we're not influenced by influencers who are all across social media with their selfies, promising everything, that we can all be as good as them. I'm not giving influencers a hard time, I just don't like them. But we look to the research evidence because the science of nutrition is one of the most explored, written about, and evidence-based sciences of human health that there is. Because remember, and I'm very proud to have spent time working clinically in a big hospital, working in the medical system, very proud of that. I'm still supportive of that. I still represent that on occasions. But that's not health, that's sickness. When we look at all aspects and comments around about health, it's everything we invest in to reduce the likelihood of sickness. Okay, everyone with me? Everyone take exception to that? I've said this back home, I don't know if you know, in the UK we have something called the NHS, which is the National Health Service. And I've worked for them, I've been on strategy panels for them, and I've regularly been on TV and radio saying they need to change their name. It's misleading. No one goes there when they're healthy. It's the National Sickness Service. Were you to show up at your doctor's waiting room and say, listen, I feel great, I'd just like some advice on how to keep this going, they just go next. Because all they deal with are sick people. Their job is to support sick people. It's not health at all. And it doesn't even lead towards health. The absence of sickness is not health. That's not the definition of health. And so what we do is we look at carbs, proteins, fats, fluids, vitamins, minerals, all to enhance training adaptations. Because when you do more and the body is under more stress, then the body needs more. It needs to allow for this. It needs to upregulate. Somebody who is more active more often for more of the time needs more of this information. It needs more of these nutritional components to not only adapt, but also to maintain. So, how do we apply individualized plans? And this is the key part, because we give out lots of broad-based general information. And protein is one of the areas that gets one of the greatest amounts of attention. So does anyone in the room know how much protein you should consume each day? You're all humans. You've all been on the planet for at least 20 summers. Okay, so we've got 1.5 times your weight. Anyone else? Doesn't depend on your DNA. Not at all. And I know that there are probably websites telling you that. Don't click on them. So it's really simple. And actually, protein gets a lot of attention it doesn't deserve, because protein's really simple. Okay? So if you're an average person, and I mean average as the rest of the world, not you people who aren't normal, which means you're not average either, who largely sedentary lifestyle, all those kind of things, doesn't move much, certainly doesn't get to 30 minutes most days of the week, doesn't get 10,000 steps a day. If you're just an average person, you need around about 1.5 grams per kilogram of your own mass per day, just to maintain your muscle mass, because your body is breaking down tissue every single day and reconstituting it. If you're starting to be more active, physically active, starting to do a bit of exercise, you probably want to take that up to about 1.7 grams per kilogram per day. And then, if you're training every day with some intensity and with some purpose, then you're going to start to get more towards the 2 grams per kilogram per day, which is a lot of protein. And that's what people start to call a high protein diet. But protein needs are essential. They really are. but it's had so much spotlight on it that a lot of people forgot the fundamentals of biochemistry, which I'm going to take you back to shortly, because actually there is a step before protein that's more important. So this is why, though, that example is that we need to give individualized plans, because I don't know if you need to have 2 grams or 1.7. I don't know if you need 1.5 or 1.9. It has to be individualized. Just to say, well, we're all playing football, so what? I need to know your weight. I need to know your type of training. I need to know what position you're in. And is everyone familiar with the greatest sport on earth, which is rugby? Yeah? Genuinely, I love rugby. I played it as a younger man. I've worked in rugby. It's the most counterintuitive sport in the world. There's no pads, there's no protection, and everybody wants the ball, because when you get the ball, someone bigger than you will knock you out. That's the most counterintuitive thing. It's great for your children. If you mentioned resilience before. If you want resilient kids, get them to play rugby for a couple of years. Seriously. But imagine that. And in rugby, you have forwards, and you have backs, and you have people on the wing. So it's all really, really different. It's really different. So it has to be individualized. Just the fact that you're doing the same sport, that just tells me the sport in need. And then it has to be based on the goals, because it's not always about winning. Sometimes it's developmental. Sometimes you've had an injury. You might be in recovery. And we have to look at things like physiology, and we have to look at whether or not we're building to a 4-year peak like we do in the Olympics, or are you going to play a game every week like we do in football? So there are so many variables that go into our assessment and how we apply it. I worked on you'll all know the Tour de France. Yeah, one of the most grueling cycling competitions in the world. And in 2007, I worked on that. I was one of the tour physiologists. I mean, the calorific expenditure per day of these athletes, the energy, the power they are putting through the pedals. And when they get onto mountain stages, it's unbelievable. And you can only get a certain amount of energy in whilst they're active. So can you imagine what it's like the minute they get back to the bus, and the things that you have to do to recover them so that next day they can get up and go and do it all again? It's remarkable. It's individualized. It's very specific to the sport, to the person, to the needs, to the demands of what they've literally just done. So it's not simple. And you can't just give someone one guideline.
Can I ask something about the protein intake? Because I was wondering, you said it's individualized and depends on the form of exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering for a while already if when you're bulking, so you're trying to gain, when you're, yes, thank you. When you're trying to gain muscle, trying to gain weight, and you are eating more calories than you burn, so you're kind of growing in a bulking stage. Do I need maybe less protein than when I have the opposite case? So I have a lower calorie intake than what I burn, and I'm losing weight, but I'm trying to retain the muscle. Do I?
So there's an art to I know what you mean by bulking. Just to take everyone back, in the 90s, I went over to the US and spent a little bit of time working in Gold's Gym in Venice Beach, which even has a poster up that says the Mecca of bodybuilding. And back in the day, it's just down the road from Muscle Beach, which you'll have seen on TV. And so my PTSD gets triggered when we talk about bodybuilding, because if ever a situation was overcomplicated, it's bodybuilding. I've built athletes. I've built enormous athletes. I've built huge athletes for gymnastics. I've built huge athletes when it comes to shot put and discus, and certainly in rugby. Some of them are just unbelievable. And I've helped people to do bodybuilding. It's like, I feel like it's a confession. You know the way you have Alcoholics Anonymous? I feel like we should have Bodybuilder Coach Anonymous. My name's Colin. I've actually helped people to build muscle for no good reason whatsoever. And it's way more simple than you think, but I'll explain it in a moment when we get to omega-3, okay? Because everyone does this. Are you all familiar with this bodybuilder language of bulking and eating more? It's like an excuse for bodybuilders to be fat for 9 months of the year. Bulking. And then they do horrendous things to shred it all off, and dehydrate themselves so they can stand on stage and let other men comment on whether or not they look good in a pair of Speedos. It's an interesting sport. It really is. But we use the principles in other sports. We have to build other athletes up to be big and strong as well. But I'll come to it. It's really simple. It gets so needlessly complicated, and I'll give you a little successful formula that we use in sport all the time. Okay. The key to building bigger muscles is the type of training. I promise you now, getting your protein ratio right, but also getting what we call the anabolic enzyme activity right, and that's where a lot of people compromise their protein gains, and I'll explain that in a moment. Okay. So, as in most things, if you're not testing, you are guessing. And in sport, in modern sport, we test everything. We like literally everything. We test their attitude for training that day. We test their urine. We test their blood. We test their VO2 max. We test their jump height. We test their strength. We test their, you name it. If it is a part of the sport or a part of them that we want to develop, we test it. And we've got phenomenal tests. I remember, because as you can tell, I've been around for a while, back in my early days of sports science, the kit, we had to really invent things on the go. We would be in the laboratories, wanting to test an athlete, and the kit didn't exist, and we'd have to invent things and algorithms so that we could calculate what these things meant. And they went from being quite crude things all the way through into the sophisticated measures we have now. Before I joined Enzino, I was the lab director of a state-of-the-art £30 million sports science laboratories in Greater Manchester, where literally elite athletes would come in. We used to call it the athlete factory. Elite athletes would come in and we could do anything. We could measure anything we wanted. Some of our items of equipment were worth over $500,000 in themselves. We measure everything, so we don't leave anything to guesswork. And that's why, to me, when I joined Enzino, and you've got things like the blood test for the fatty acid profile, whilst that might be new to people, and I still hear it now where some academic or doctor will go, why don't I know about this? And I go, I don't know. I don't know why you don't know. Have you got any ideas? Because we've been doing this for years and years and years and years. We know why we do it. But none of this was new. And we were measuring fatty acid profiles in people 21 years ago because we knew that the role omega-3 plays on muscular development, on managing the athlete, is so fundamental, is so important. But you've got to have the athlete in the right state. So we were measuring this 21 years ago, and those test measures have only improved and improved and improved ever since. So we measure everything. When I was working on the Tour de France, you'll be really envious now of the job I had. One of my jobs, we would take blood samples every day because we have to check the athletes and certain things we have to analyze. But I uniquely had the job that nobody else wanted. Every morning, 2 hours before they set off on the bike, every cyclist has to give a urine sample in a jar and leave them outside my hotel room. This would be around about 4:30 in the morning, 5 o'clock. And then I would take them all into my hotel room, and I would have to take the lid off every single one, and I would do certain osmolarity checks, so to look at fluid turnover, because they've rested all night, and we need to know their status of fluid turnover first thing in the morning. So we can say, rider 2 needs to have 1500 mil, and we need to put this electrolyte in. So this is how specific it is. We've got to hydrate this way. And you've got to bear in mind, we might be in the French mountains, and they've just done hours and hours on a bike, and they get back and they've been doing some recovery stuff and some hydration. They go to bed for a few hours, and then they get up and it's their morning pee. And some of it, literally, you could light up the room. And then you would lift the lid off. Wow. And I'd have to do this osmolarity check for fluid turnover. And I was envious of all the people who just got to take the blood off them. I've got to do all this. But we measure everything. Like nothing is left. And so now in the modern world, and one of the things that we do at Zinzino is test-based nutrition. It's to make it so the whole world can do this. This is what we've been doing with the cream of the crop, the best of the best, the most successful advanced humans for decades. The only difference now is that we're making it available to everybody else. And why not? They call it trickle-down technology, but it's not. It's just the fact that, well, that's why I left the hospital. I left the hospital because I went, there's so much we do in sport that the general people need to benefit from. We've got to build a bridge so that everybody gets access to it. So in sport, if you're not testing, you're guessing. And you've got to be able to measure things. So, believe me, on my computer, that picture was way sharper. And now it looks a little bit blurred. Recently, I've had to change my prescription, so maybe it's just me. But actually, no, there's nothing wrong with that image. It's completely sharp. And if it doesn't look sharp to you, you're not taking enough balance oil. So I'll leave you to decide, okay? But that's essentially the test, don't guess, approach is a big part of what caught my attention about Zinzino nearly 5 years ago, was the whole notion of, and you might have heard of this and dealt with this, but can you imagine it from my point of view? I'm working at home, it's lockdown, I'm a lab director dealing with multiple elite sports. I'm a research coordinator for 2 international health strategies. I'm doing a project on omega-3s because we know there's a huge global deficiency. And the phone rings and says, hey, have you heard about this company? It's omega-3 supplement and they do a test. I'm like, yeah, of course they do. And then let me guess. You do the test and you're really bad. And then you take their magic formula and then you've become really good. Is that what happens? And then because it was a good friend of mine, he said, well, yeah, basically. He said, however, he was in the States, he was like really high up. Have you ever heard of the clothing brand called Under Armour? Yeah? So he was really high up in that over in the States. And his American doctor had said, there's only one omega-3 that works, and it's this Scandinavian company. That's the one you need to have. And so when he asked me to have a look at it, because he's like, it's all right, a doctor saying that, but I want someone who knows about nutrition to have a look at it. When I took a look at it, I was really skeptical. This is the oldest trick in the book. It's snake oil. They were doing it in the Wild West for years. But when I looked and saw the test and realized it was the Trondheim test, well, that's the same test we use for fatty acid profile. And then when I realized it was Vitas who was doing the test, I was like, well, no matter what, the test's real, because this is 2 of the most valid, reliable, internationally recognized standards there is. So the test is definitely right. What I had to then kind of pay closer attention to was the product. But here we are. Obviously, it worked out pretty well. So I'm going to take you through now key categories of what we do and how it impacts on sports performance. But I want you to remember, all of this impacts on health. So later on, we're going to do a health view on all this, but this is very much from the point that if you're doing exercise, or if you're pretty good at your physical activity, getting your 10,000 steps in a day, you've got a vigorous lifestyle, but certainly if you're doing exercise, all of this is relevant to you, and it's going to enhance and unlock the things you'd like to achieve with your fitness. But if you're in sport, where we are now, in the 21st century, a quarter of the way through, if you're not working to these principles, you're way out of date. You are way, and I'm happy for anyone to challenge me on that, and really I am. I'm still to this day working alongside and in touch with some of the best sports nutritionists in the world. People like Professor Graham Close and Professor James Norton and all these people who are right at the top of the game. They're publishing on this. And the world's leading expert, who is Professor Chris McGlory, who runs a team and a lab over in Canada, who is the world's leading expert on omega-3 in sports performance. These are all the kind of guidelines he's putting out. He was on the Rhonda Patrick podcast just last year. So if you're not up to date with all of this, you're welcome to debate, but I'll tell you now, you're out of date. You're way behind. And so we know that omega-3 fatty acids are essential polyunsaturated fats, and they're recognized widely for their anti-inflammatory and cardiovascular benefits. So any doctor in the world who knows, even if they know nothing about nutrition, has spent the past 30 years saying to the patient and everyone, take some extra virgin olive oil every day. Take it every single day because it's got cardiovascularly protective benefits. And we also know it's great in the instance of things like arthritis, for reducing overall inflammation. Omega-3 is essential in two ways. The body can't produce certainly enough of it, and then sometimes any of it, to satisfy its biochemical needs, and it's essential with regards to its functionality. The relevance to athletes really drops down to the relevance that we see across general societies. It's the EPA and DHA. So EPA is kind of the one that we say is the most anti-inflammatory. And the reason we say that is simple. Is because it's when we compare EPA, the omega-3, to the AA, the arachidonic acid, which is the omega-6, which is the pro-inflammatory. And the reason we say anti-inflammatory versus pro-inflammatory is because at a cellular level or a systemic level, we know that the ratio of those two and the index of those two tell us so much about your general state of health and well-being. And when there is a sufficient amount of omega-3, well, we get some really interesting changes in muscle function, muscle morphology. DHA, you probably all know this, but 60% of your brain is fat. And 20 to 25% of that should be made up of DHA. So if you are deficient in this, you're actually deficient in a fundamental component of what makes up brain tissue. And that's why it's so highly correlated towards things like mood state, cognitive function, reaction time and cognitive function are really important in sport, and certainly mood state. And then I don't know if you know this, maybe you do. Apologies if I'm telling you something you already know. But when you practice something, when you practice a skill, you lay down a neurological pathway that makes that skill become second nature. So if you get two people together, one who's taken a penalty shot 500 times versus someone who's only taken it twice, whether or not they're both on target is irrelevant. The fact is the one who's done it 500 times won't even have to think so much. It's so automatic. It's second nature. Whereas there's so much cognitive processing in this person here who's never done it before. And so DHA is a part of what we call the sheath, the fat sheath that wraps around each and every single one of these neurological strings that really protect that. And have you heard the term muscle memory? Do you know that term? That's what it is in reality. Muscle memory is really this. It's that fat that lays around that nervous network that is like, right, that's how we can do that. Second nature. And that's when an athlete gets to what we call flow state, where they can do things without even thinking. Everyone familiar with that notion of terms, flow state? So these are really interesting. Because one, if we can control inflammation, and inflammation is a natural aspect of adaptation, then we can normalize, we can recover faster. If we can recover faster, we can train more. If we can train more, we have more opportunity to improve. And the more opportunity we have to improve, the more opportunity we have to dominate in our sport and be better than the competition. Yep. More opportunity you have to get better at what you do positions you in a place where you can be more dominant. It's as simple as that. And so these things are vital. When we start to look at muscle recovery, and again, these are for you to take pictures, what we see is the mechanism, the evidence around that, and I've tried to give you a practical example. So the mechanism is, first of all, that we reduce exercise-induced muscle damage, EIMD, and inflammation, which facilitates quicker recovery. If you ever look at a textbook, and I taught this a lot when I was at the university and I was still teaching undergraduates, we teach them this inflammatory curve. And we go, right then, the competition or the exercise is here, and inflammatory markers go up and they peak, and then over 24 hours they do this, and then over 48 they do this, and 72 they do that, and then everything's back to normal. And it sounds great, but it's just not true. That is an idealized version of the inflammatory curve. Because the reality is that people's inflammatory status was already high, largely because of their dietary choices. They do some exercise, they make it even higher. And then their dietary choices, which are more pro-inflammatory and decidedly lacking in things like omega-3, well, they facilitate a continuous onset, a prolonged period of that inflammatory state. So it can actually, in the real world, rather than 72 hours for it to come back down to normal, and we measure this, we measure things like CRP, we measure things like creatine kinase, and we measure omega-3, it can be 100 hours, it can be 120 hours. And we see people who are what we call recreationally fit, they can actually take in excess of 10 days. And they might have done things in between. But if you're already in a recovery phase and you're doing more, it only compromises. You're not optimizing. And you might even be still making some progress, but you're not making optimal progress. And in sport, that's what we're focused on. We're not interested in average. We want to optimize. And so if we can reduce this, if we can get it back down to that real 24-hour, 48-hour, and we've got our training variation, I've got you training really, really well, training consistently, making more improvement, managing you better, meaning that you've got less likelihood of injury, you're stronger, faster, fitter, go for longer, and producing a better athlete overall. And if you're coming back from an injury, these things are even more important. So there's plenty of work in this area. I've become well accustomed now to the laziest comment that people say, and it is starting to drive me mad. You'll get someone who thinks of themselves as an expert, and they go, show me the research. And you go, you lazy, arrogant. Like, take 10 seconds. Go onto Google Scholar or PubMed and go, omega-3, muscle recovery. That's it. And you'll find literally millions of papers. So when these people say to me, so where's the evidence? Literally now, remember I'm Irish and we love a fight. I am so tempted to just slap them. No, just go, you're just being lazy. You're lazy and arrogant. Because one, it's there if you want to go and find it. And two, you think somehow you've got some power over me that I'm going to go, yes, I'll go and get all that evidence for you. I'll do that for you. The onus is on you as a health practitioner, as a doctor, as a nutritionist, as a medic, as a professor. The onus is on you. So the whole, why don't I know? Show me the research. Stop saying that. It makes you look foolish. Just spend 10 minutes of your day. Remember 10 minutes, what category that puts you in. Go on to PubMed, go on to Google Scholar, and go and access all that peer-reviewed research. And then you don't need to say silly things like that. But here's a good paper. Recent one, 2022. And you might be aware of this title here, DOMS, Delayed Onset of Muscle Soreness. Does anybody work in sport or fitness? No one. You're all a bit shy, aren't you? I'm not putting my hand up, because if I put my hand up, he's going to ask me something. I don't want to get involved in this session any more than I am. So, for those of you who've worked in sport and fitness, or even heard of this, DOMS, Delayed Onset of Muscle Soreness. What's the mechanism? Why do you get DOMS? Yeah, that's the literal. But what's the mechanism? What's the mechanism? What has happened to that structure that creates this? The truth is, there's some research that's looking at inflammation. There's other research that's looking at neurological components. The truth is, we don't know yet. We know people get it. It's really, really common. But the exact reason why people get it, yes, it's related to exercise, particularly excessive exercise. But we don't fully, no one's finally said, and that's it. But we know people get it. But the interesting thing is that consistently it aligns with inflammatory response curves. Because when you manage inflammation, you reduce DOMS. And so think of this for yourself. You might have been to the gym, New Year's Day, because the day before, when you were drinking wine, you went, New Year, new me. I'm going to start tomorrow. And then you woke up and the kids went, you're going to the gym, aren't you? Let's go and do this. Or you're one of those people that I take satisfaction in looking at on January the 1st and 2nd, and they're out there at the worst time of the year, wearing all their brand new kit, trying to run in the worst weather, and they wonder why they quit. But after that initial session, it's really common for you to get DOMS. We've had a break from exercise, so most of us have experienced it. But what we see consistently is where there is a sufficient amount of omega-3, as in above 8% total, DOMS is less of a factor, and in a lot of instances, it's not even a factor at all. So it's definitely related to the presence of inflammatory markers. We can improve cardiovascular efficiency. Omega-3 enhances blood flow, oxygen delivery to muscles, improving endothelial function. There's plenty of research around this. In fact, it's probably one of the most researched aspects of sports performance. And we see this improvement in oxygen kinetics most measurably in long distance runners, but there's even good work that shows it in football, in rugby, track and field, even in 100-meter sprinters. Because believe me, 100-meter sprinters spend a lot of time training their endurance mechanisms as well as their anaerobic mechanisms. And so we know that omega-3 is cardiovascularly protective, but there's not enough talked about the fact that it leads to cardiovascular efficiencies. And remember at the start I told you, sport and adaptation is all about developing efficiencies, making the systems more efficient so they can do more and they're less stressed at any point of what we do and what we engage in. And so omega-3 found its way into sport through this, really. So it was targeted for this, the simple notion, if it's cardiovascularly protective, maybe it enhances cardiovascular function. And the early research, you go back and you'll sound, it was really, really promising. And it's been built on, it's been refined, and now it's well established. And then off the back of that, our understanding of omega-3 took us then into the experiential part. People saying, when I've got enough omega-3, I'm less sore. So that was experiential. Then you start to look into the mechanism of that and omega-3's role in controlling inflammation. So already, if you're looking, and if you're in this room from a sports background, you should be thinking, okay, other than, I did this the other day and someone shouted chess. I said, other than darts and snooker, tell me a sport that doesn't rely on some type of cardiovascular efficiency. And someone went, chess. But it does, because cardiovascular efficiency leads to blood-brain barrier efficiencies. More oxygen to the brain is highly implicated in cognitive function and IQ. So there is a benefit. Admittedly, I'm forcing it that way, but it is true. But most sports, the vast majority of sports, rely on a level of cardiovascular efficiency and a fitter athlete. And so this is where the research keeps coming back round to as well. It keeps coming back round to this. Then we get into boosting muscle protein synthesis. So for our guy who wants even bigger biceps than the ones he's got in his little tight top now, ready to bulk. So imagine this, because this is how it works. You've gone to the gym, worked the guns, you've broken down the muscle tissue, and the tissue is broken and torn. Okay, and it's going to go into a repair cycle. But what you want is biochemically, you want a conversation that says, make them bigger. I want a bigger muscle. I've done this type of sets and reps and resistance. I've created enough inflammation within the muscle. And what I want is the anabolic activity. I want enough pathway signaling molecules to say, make the muscle bigger. And so if you do the exercise and you take the protein, you will get some benefit, for sure, you will. But let's say you were doing that, you were training well, and you were taking the right amount of protein. If we were to say what percentage out of 100 are you optimizing your potential, you're probably around about 75 at best. But 75 feels like 100 because you've never known anything else. You go, this is great, this is what happens. I train, I take my protein, I train, take protein, and that's what happens. But see, protein itself is not an anabolic pathway signaler. Omega-3 is. So it's the presence of omega-3 that stimulates muscle protein synthesis. So if you are omega-3 deficient, training and taking protein, the gains you're getting are only a percentage of the gains you're potentially capable of, because a huge part of that communication mechanism isn't functioning. But you should never expect to see a change if you didn't make one. And the problem with a lot of the early research in sports science around omega-3 is it would say, okay, here's my athlete, take omega-3, do some training, and let's measure strength, let's measure muscles and see what happens. And they go, nothing happens. So we know that omega-3 is a anabolic enzyme activity stimulator, but doesn't seem to do anything. But then clever minds, in around about 2003, 2004, said, but hold on, all the literature says the athlete, the individual, has to have above 8% total fat omega-3 before you can expect this. So are these supplements, is this diet, is it getting them there? So then a lot of work started to go, okay, can you get an athlete above 8% with standard supplementation? And what was the answer? No, couldn't get there. So the average score for people around the world, normal people, omega-3 status, what is it? 4. About 4. Athletes, superhumans, godlike, what do you think their average score is? 4.4. They are 0.4 better than the rest of us. But think about it. Even with really good diets, they are training. They are prompting more pro-inflammatory markers on a daily basis because they're breaking down muscle tissue. They're eliciting that inflammatory curve. And unless there is a sufficient amount in their diet to compensate for that and to compensate for the training, then they're not going to be above 8%. And also, if your timing of it is wrong, then you'll use it as a fuel. So there's not only just the fact that you need enough to enable that recovery. If you time it wrong as to when you take it, you'll just use it as a fuel. So with athletes, there's an art to it. And back in 2004, 2005, we were working with 3 Premiership football teams. And we were looking at nutritional strategies. And one of the things we were looking at was omega-3. Because we were like, this is really going to be the key to unlocking recovery. And so we were using what we could access at the time as the best supplements. And we were increasing how much they would take. And we were implementing tests, because we were doing these kind of tests all the way back then. And no matter how much of the best supplement we could give them, we could never get them to get above 8%. We really couldn't. And more recently, we had an athlete. He was a winter athlete. He was a Team GB winter athlete. And he's one of the best athletes I've ever come across in how he manages himself. Always does the extra training. As you said at the back, he was the kind of athlete that shows up early, finishes last, does what he's coached, practices his own things, downhill, slalom skier. And he came to us. And his diet, he was having really good quality fatty fish 2 to 3 times every day. So he was having salmon, he was having bluefin tuna, he was having mackerel, anchovies, a real variety every single day. And we were looking at what improvements we can help him to make across. He trained really well. He was in great shape. He'd had a few injuries that took a little bit of time to recover. So we thought, right, well, we'll do a test. Let's just test it and see. And our expectation was, because he was consuming so much fish, he should be in the right range. And he was. There's no surprise. We did this test. His result came back. And if I remember rightly, his first test, he was above 8%. And he was, I think he was like 3.9, 4 to 1. He was pretty much just on the target. And we were like, fantastic, brilliant. You know, it's great to see. You know, brilliant. Carry on. And he went, God, no. I'm sick of eating fish. He's like, if there's anything I can do to not eat fish so often, help me out. He's like, what's this magic stuff you've got there? And so we swapped him across because he was, one, certain sports get more funding than others. And eating that type of fish 3 times a week adds up in costs. And so a lot of it he was having to pay for himself. And that's because he really was all in on his self-management and prep. And then the other part is he's human, you know, and eating that fish every single day, and we're talking for years, gets a bit overwhelming. So we thought, well, we'll just swap it. So what we'll do is we don't expect him to feel any benefit because he's already there, but we'll swap it because it's going to make his quality of life better. So we put him onto the oil, reduced his fish consumption down. He was still eating fish because you should eat fish. He was having fish, you know, 3 or 4 times a week, but we swapped him across. Within 2 weeks, he came in saying, I've never slept so well. He said, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's placebo. I've never slept so well. His energy scores, we score your energy readiness to train. He was coming in consistently at an 8 or a 9. He was coming in 10, 10, 10 every single day. So he was explaining that he was feeling benefits from the fact that he'd moved across. Then he started to train, started to make more improvements in his training, and we tested him further down the road. He'd gone from 8% to 10, and he was consistently around about 2.7 to 1. We're moving across. So the diet, which was fantastic, had pretty much got him there. But actually the move across made a change even in him that was significant enough. And by the way, the number one recovery strategy for exercise and sport is sleep. If you can get your athletes to sleep better, your athletes are going to adapt better, they're going to focus sharper, they're going to be more ready to train. So you unlock another aspect of potential. And so, you probably know this yourself, when it comes to any kind of the winter sports, relative what we call lean mass is an important component, both for what they do, but also if they have an off. You want a robust athlete that's going to cope with a fall and recover quickly. And so we see this. It's the key bit. So if you imagine now, I'm going to make it really simple. You're training, you're sending the message, you're saying, I need you to do this. But then afterwards, when the body's recovering, if there is an insufficient amount of omega-3, there's nothing that is organising that biochemical conversation to say, do more of this. There's no conductor. There's no one taking charge of what needs to happen. And so you can make improvements for sure, but you're never going to optimize your improvement. And you really will unlock the door by taking an omega-3 approach. There are tons of systematic reviews, and there's a few meta-analyses, and they're really where you statistically quantify an area. And systematic reviews of omega-3 supplementation consistently shows that, especially in healthy athletes and active athletes, it amplifies protein synthesis. So, reducing inflammation and injury risk. So, if you're playing rugby and someone punches you in the head, omega-3 isn't going to jump out the bottle and go, stop doing that, leave him alone, he's a nice person. Okay? If you are skiing and the skis go right and you go left, it's not going to stop you getting a broken leg. Or maybe it will, because the more robust those systems, those muscles and those bones and those tendons and those ligaments, the more you can deal with those kind of occasions. But the reason why is that anti-inflammatory properties of the omega-3 lowers chronic inflammation, silent inflammation, whatever you want to call it, which is what a lot of people live with. And this decreases the risk of overuse injuries. It's as simple as that. And this is true when you start to look at it in the context of your health. A lot of people are unnecessarily sick, whether it's a cold, a cough, a flu, a virus, because their general level of inflammation is such that the immune system is under such a burden that only a small thing comes along and the system is under too much strain. And so the pathogen wins. And so when you can control that down so that the immune system and the endocrine systems are offloaded in a more normalized state, and something comes around, you've got a revitalized immune system response. But by reducing pro-inflammatory cytokines, we reduce injury, we aid in injury prevention because the system is more robust, less excitable, but also the system is more resilient and robust to the extent that it can withstand these things better. So these are the key examples. There are awkward, really irritating injuries that athletes get, and they get plagued with them. And things like tendonitis are just a pain. And things like, we call it like tennis elbow and golfer's elbow and patella tendonitis. And these little things, they're so irritating. And anything with an itis on it, and if you don't know, just means inflammation. It's swollen, it's inflamed. And it can be non like defined. It's swollen, it's irritated. So when you reduce inflammation, you reduce the itis part of the situation, and you enable those pro-anabolic mechanisms, then you have a stronger, more robust system that is less hindered. Because what do we do? If you've got a sore elbow, or you've got a sore knee, what's your common thing to do? Do you go, brilliant, I'm going to load that up, I'm going to jump off things? What do you do? What do most people do? Rest, protect it, and they move it less. When actually what the body really wants is to move more and be more active. But we do the opposite. We rest it. So if you can reduce that, if you can eliminate that part of it, there's more opportunity to be stronger and faster. Now we get into our enhancing cognitive function. DHA, which I've explained, is vital for brain health. Really hugely implicated in focus, cognitive function, and reaction times. And remember, and I love sport. Sport has been my super highway for life. But all sport requires decision making. And so fitness will get you there, but cognitive function and reaction time enables you to be in charge. So we'll go for football. I know there's 3 people in the room like it. So, and I don't know enough about hockey. But if you think of football, if 2 players from opposing sides are chasing the same ball, the first person to get there is the person who has the opportunity to inform the next sequence of the game. Yeah? So there's 2 players running for the same ball. The one who gets there first, or the fastest one, a key component of our development, they get there, they can make a choice. But let's be honest, unless it's Liverpool playing Manchester City, there's not going to be a lot of time between those 2 players. Yeah? And so the next player is coming in. So you need to react. You need to be able to read the situation. You need to look where the opportunity is to either play the ball or pass the ball. And it's all happening in seconds. And sport is defined by seconds. I've done talks like this in the past, and they're available online if you want to see it, where I've shown the difference between not just winning 100 meters, but actually being 4th place. So you don't even get on the podium. And we're talking about hundredths of seconds. And that decision on the ball to play or pass it and who you pass it to could be what makes the difference to the next goal that's scored that determines whether or not you go on to win the game. So sport is measured by seconds. And if you've got an athlete who can think sharper, better cognitive function, sharper reaction times, who can read the game, bang, and make a more accurate pass, then you've got a more dominant team. You've got a more dominant player. And it's the same across all sports. 100 meters is one of the most definable, or the 200 meters, or the 400 meters, but definitely the 100 is one of the most definable reaction time sports in the world. They are all capable of running really fast, but it's who can get fast quickest. That's one of the key attributes of 100 meters. So what's the reaction component in the 100 meters? What do you react to? The start, the gun, the beep. Beep and gone. And you can watch it. And if you work in sport, you do. You sit there and you watch. And you're my athlete. And there's 10 others lined up. And I'm watching you because I want to see what happens to you when the beep goes. That's what I'm interested in. Do you stall? Do you pause? Do you stagger? Is there a delay? Or are you ready and off? How many times have you watched the Olympics and saw it reset? Because they all get there and someone who's really jittery goes, but the bell hasn't gone yet. Because of anticipation. And you see this across all sports. The reaction time is so crucial. And so a practical example I've given here is regards to precision. Things like archery or shooting things. Cognitive function, reaction time. It's critical in it to be able to steady the whole system and be specific. But I've given you 10 other examples that maybe are closer to home. So when we enhance cognitive function, we enhance the athlete's capacity to make a difference to the outcome of the game or the race. And so DHA, which is an attribute that's so commonly deficient in most athletes and most humans, I mean, maybe I'll say this in the next talk, which is about health, but the world's gone through a crazy phase, you've probably noticed, and there's been some terrible decision making that also coincides at a time when we estimate that 6.3 billion people have got an omega-3 deficiency. Now, I'm not saying that correlation is always cause and effect, but at a time when we know that the vast majority of people in the world are deficient in something that plays such a significant role on cognitive function, maybe it explains some of the decisions that are being made. I don't know. It's just my theory. So, where are we doing? We're doing great for time. I'll even be able to have some time for questions at this rate. I'm going to give you this because I said at the start, you can't really give general guidelines because it's so individualized, but you can give people a place to start from. Now I know, because I've done this talk twice now, I'll say suggesting up to 3.5 grams a day, and someone will come up to me and go, you know, you said 3.5 grams, but my blah 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 does this. What do you think they should do? So it's individualized. All across this room there will be individual requirements or the people that you're working to. This is just a guideline, and this is saying that there are studies suggesting up to 3.5 grams per day of combined EPA and DHA. And for anyone who's looked at the area of omega-3 and guidelines and recommendations, is 3.5 grams high, medium or low? That was a bit overwhelming when you all answer at once. Anyone want to guess, is that a low recommendation, a medium or a high? I'd say it's medium to high. And the reason being, as I explained earlier, athletes are going to utilize more of it as fuel. Athletes are going to be in more of a pro-inflammatory state, and so require that to be compensated more. And so there's more of a daily need. They're going to utilize it far more than the average person who's just physically active. We're looking at natural sources. No matter what, please remember that we supplement the diet. That's what we do. When we're talking about health, it's easier because there are so many challenges in the world when it comes to a healthy diet. But whenever we look at in supplementation, we're looking at intelligent supplementation. And you should be looking at how can I make this, one, not just easier, but how can I make this more effective? If the body's working to efficiencies, we're working to effectiveness. And intelligent supplementation is where you go, okay, there's only so much I can achieve realistically through a diet in a certain area. And that opens the door for me to consider supplementation. And that's why, I think I've got time, it irritates me a lot because we should be way past this now. You know, nutritionists, whether they're online, in a hospital, whatever it is, what really irritates me is this notion when people say, you don't need supplements, you can do all of this with your diet. You can. That is 100% true. You can. It's a great message. And I used to spread that message. If I take you back in my career, 20 years ago, working in a big hospital, do it all with your diet. Do it all with your diet. And all the years we've been saying this, certainly the 30 years that I've been involved, and the years before, every statistic that relates to diet and health has gone the wrong way. So that message, although it's right, has actually helped barely anyone. And when you say that, there's always someone who'll go, yeah, but you know, look at this person here, you're brilliant, there's 8 billion of us and you've got one. Well done. We're on a bigger mission. And so yes, you can do it all through diet, but in reality it's so difficult and you don't have to make things needlessly hard. So like that Winter Olympics athlete I told you about, he was doing it through the diet, but given the option to not have to have fish 3 times a day every single day, he's like, God, give me the magic sauce. That was his whole attitude. You know, and so where we can do things more efficiently and more effectively, we should. And also, simplicity is key. Humans, which I'll definitely talk about when we discuss health, we have a relationship with food. And it can be hard to break and it can be hard to change. And I know I've counseled and supported and directed countless people through it. You know the easiest way to make a positive change in someone's diet? Is make it simple. Let's go, if I would say to you, okay, right, I've looked at your diet, your omega-3 levels are terrible, you're eating too much of this, so now what I want you to do, I want you to go home, and for lunch you're going to have bluefin tuna. For your meal of a night time, you're going to have a really fresh piece of salmon with some vegetables. And then, I want you to make sure that at some other point the next day we're going to have some like nice mackerel in there, and we're going to have some anchovies, and then we're going to do the same the next day. And I'm taking all that chocolate out, and what you're going to do now is you're going to have 6 or 7 different types of fibrous carbs, leafy greens, carrots every single day. And people sit there going, yeah. Oh yeah. I'm going to do that tomorrow. And they go home and they nurture themselves with a bar of chocolate whilst they get over the shock. Whereas if I say to you, take this, just take that, and we're going to start to make a positive change. You go, okay, and give that a go. Just do this. And that actually takes you right back to the power of epigenetics. Epigenetics is the reality you can change gene expression by being consistent with simple things that you do. Blueberries are really epigenetic. Raspberries are epigenetic. Turmeric is epigenetic. Omega-3 is epigenetic. Olive oil is epigenetic. So if I get you to just take this every day, and also go back, Cole, go back, he says. This clicker's not working. There. It'll probably go back too many now because I've pressed it 5 times. But if we're talking about DHA, if we're talking about a globally recognized deficiency, and I want you to think differently so that you can turn different thoughts into different actions, one of the best things I can do is just go, okay, all that other stuff we'll figure it out, but let's just start topping that up. Let's get it so you got a sufficient amount of DHA, and then let's see how you feel about the other changes you need to make. So there is such a power to just putting the good stuff in. But yes, natural sources, fresh, wild, line-caught, fatty fish, salmon, mackerel, tuna. You've got your plant-based omegas. So remember now, you won't get EPA and DHA from flax seeds. You get other types of omega-3s. You won't get those, okay? But we can get other types of really good protective omega-3s from different specific types. And I'm not going to delve into it here, but I can see there's a lot of women in the room, and all I'm going to say is, based on my interpretation of the research and the data, and the protective benefits that are derived from the nutrients in walnuts, you should all be making sure, unless you have a nut intolerance, that you're eating them pretty much every day, is what I'd say. I'm not going to delve into diseases and why I think that. If you go and have a quick look, you'll see for yourself. But we are at the point of consensus, that we know that there are certain protective elements to the nutrients we take from that, particularly for women. Okay, so go and check that out, and I would recommend it. Supplementation, high quality fish oil or algae based supplements, and this is the key bit now. What time are we on? We're okay.
You have 15 minutes.
So the key bit is
With the Q&A.
including the Q&A.
Including.
Yeah. So I'll just consume it all up. Me talking, don't have to answer any questions. But the key bit is now we're in a different place to when I joined Zinzino 4.5 years ago. And there are more people who are making comments and they're trying to copy what we do, and the people saying all they're doing is taking fish oil and olive oil, there's nothing special about it. They're really, it's such a ignorant statement. The quality of what you do is everything when it comes to this. So it's the blend of the fish oil, the ratio of the EPA and the DHA for it to be functional, the amount of research that's gone into that. The olive oil, we, and I can say this with all pride, we own the singularly best olive oil producer in the world. It's got the highest phytonutrient polyphenol count compared to any other olive oil anywhere. Revu, which you'll find in the premium oil, there is no comparison to it. The oldest functioning olive tree in the world, which is 1,000 years old, belongs to Chianti, and we own Chianti. We literally have a very specific way of extracting the olive oil that is decidedly different to anyone else, and it's patented. So other people can talk magic, but we have the only patented way of producing that oil. The phytonutrient count, the quality of the oil, the ratio of the fish oil or the algae equivalent is so specific to the change that we consistently see. And it's all those quality markers that set it apart. And this recommendation of high quality, that's not even mine. This is when I go about and look at the research, look at the guidelines. What's the commentary from the scientific field? It has to be the highest quality. So when people do things that look similar, sound similar, all the rest of it, it's just not the same. And I say to everybody, because you might not like this, but my favorite make of car is BMW. I just love BMW cars. Don't know what it is. It's irrational, but I just love them. And I say to everyone, do you want a BMW or do you want a copy of a BMW? Or do you want an Audi or do you want a copy of an Audi? Or do you want a Porsche or do you want a copy of a Porsche? The difference is everything between what you're getting when it's a copy or the real deal. So think about that. So we're going to go into our summaries now. So timing, consume, and this is good for you as well, consuming your omega-3s or your supplement with a meal enhances absorption. Okay, and some people actually, because it's an oil, find it heavy on the stomach. And I say the best advice is sit down with your meal, take a couple of mouthfuls of the first thing you're going to eat, drink your oil, and then carry on eating. And take the burden off the stomach. You're going to get better absorption and you'll tolerate it better. However, if you're exercising, you know you're going to exercise that day, take it as a part of your recovery meal or certainly sometime after the exercise or sports training. If you take it before, and certainly even if you take it 2 hours before, maybe it's part of a breakfast, you'll utilize too much of it as fuel. Okay? So avoid that trap. Put it as part of your recovery. Okay? And then you need to change your needs based on what you do. Because when people say, and I hear it a lot, they go, well, how much do you take? Well, it depends on what I'm doing. You all know the guidelines on the bottle. It's body weight dependent. That's very specific. And there's a good reason for that. It always fascinates me when you'll see a general recommendation. We'll say, okay, take 2 omega-3 capsules per day and you're good to go. Yeah. But how can that be good to go? Like, you and I are very different sizes, heights, weights, activity levels. Like, it should always be based at least on your body weight, and then it should be adjusted according to your activity. So if you're exercising regularly, you probably want to take that up to 1.6, 1.7. If you're exercising intensely and regularly, you want to be up at 0.2. And there may be times, especially if you're an elite athlete, that you're going to go slightly above that to compensate for everything that the body is having to endure with regards to its training and preparation and competition. So you should always be looking to adjust. And what is the art of making sure your adjustments are safe and effective? How do you know? Testing. Because if you're not testing, you're guessing. And that's the whole thing, is you test. If you need to change, you think you need to increase or decrease, well then you test and you see how that's going. Are you maintaining all those green bars and green lights and categories across the board? So we have, and this was the mission for me, is you turn the whole world into scientists. You can look under the hood. You don't need to hit it and take it and hope. You take the test and you assess and you see how that's going and you adjust accordingly. And believe it or not, my recommendation is always take the minimum you think you need to take. I know in the world we live now, people always think more is better. They go, well, if 1.5 is, if 0.15 is good, 0.3 must be amazing. No, too much of anything is never a good thing. You should always be working to economies. You should always go, what's the least amount for my body to be exactly where it needs to be? And there is an intelligence to that as well. Because let's say in normal conditions, you're taking just enough. Let's say it is that 0.15 and you've got all those green lights and everything's going great. And then, unfortunately, something comes your way. A virus or something more severe. Well, then you've got capacity to increase, to compensate and allow for this. But let's say you're at 0.15 normal, and you decide you're going to go and do the local marathon next year, well, then you're going to increase your training, your exercise, the stress on the body, so you can increase. You've got somewhere to go. If you have this mindset of going, no, 2 is better, then where'd you go? Because remember, too much of anything is never a good thing. So where you work to economies, you're really, really efficient, and you've got parameters to adjust. And it's the same with your athletes. Always with your athletes, we do this in training. We try to be economical. What's the least we have to do to get the biggest measure of change? Because that gives us a longer runway. Because the more opportunity I have to increase the training stress, the more opportunity I have to develop you and improve you. And it's the same with nutrition. What's the least I have to do to get the maximal outcome? Because then if things get tougher, we're training more intensely, I can make another adjustment, and you've got more scope, more opportunity to adjust. So here's your summary. So if nothing else, zoom in, take a picture of that, and you know as much as me. So they offer multifaceted benefits. And often, because we live in those times now, where people say, quick, tell me what's the benefit of omega-3? And I go, really? It's about an hour and 50 minutes in the middle of a place I don't even know in Finland. But it is multifaceted. And it's because it's systemic. It works with regards to controlling inflammation. It works with regards to increasing oxygen kinetics. It works in regards to reducing muscle soreness. It works in regards to amplifying the muscle response. It works in regards to improving your reaction time, cognitive function. And I did a video, you might have seen it for Zinzino, and someone showed me it the other day. And at the end of it, I've forgotten I said this. I said, balance oil is like singularly the most powerful sports nutrition supplement in the world. And I've had friends who are quite well respected and qualified sports nutritionists who've seen that and said, when I first watched it, I went, and then I thought about it and went, actually, he's probably right. Because I can't say that about protein. I can't say all that about protein. I can't say all that about creatine. I can't say all that about just taking carbohydrates so you've got enough energy. So if you look at what you need in sport and you look at one option, there's very few other supplements that you can go will give you all that. And then people go, wow, what if I do a stack and I take this, and you go, well, that's a stack. I'm saying that there's one thing here that covers all those key compartments. And I promise you now, if nothing else, if you get their omega-3 status right, if you get them above that level, then you're going to start to see measurable, significant changes with regards to their muscle morphology, those types of changes, their overall strength, their injury prevention record, and their readiness to train. And with all that, you've got someone who can train more often. Again, that's a really sharp picture. If it's blurry for you, I know someone who can hook you up with bottles of this stuff. What I would like to conclude on, and we might have a few minutes for questions on this, is the fact that any kind of change takes time, and a mindset change takes time. Now, for all of you, and forgive me if I'm wrong, some of you may have been Olympic athletes in the past, or more professional athletes. It's maybe, I don't know, maybe there is one or two people in the room who are still engaged in high-level sport. And if you are, I hope this has been really useful to you. Maybe there's people in the room who are working with people who are engaged in high-level sport, and I hope it's useful in that context too. But the people I'm really interested in are all of you, because you should all be exercising. If you want to live the best quality of life possible for as long as possible, you should be physically active. And you should be looking to maintain your muscle mass so that you can maintain your physical independence, and so that you can enjoy this thing that we call life for as long as you possibly can. I don't know if you know this, but if you look at every single measure that's taken, the number one determinant of your quality of life as you age, particularly once you get past the age of 50, 55 and 60, is your physical independence. How physically independent you are each and every day, going about doing the things you do, and have the choices to do what you want to do. Now for me, those kind of choices, I'm a simple person really. I like to go to different countries, I put the same thing on, and I go for a run. And I get to look around places. And sometimes if I didn't do that, I wouldn't get to see them. They would just be hotels that I stop at and go. And I have no intention of ever giving that up. I want to be, in the village I live, there's a guy, I think he's about 85, he's got a long white beard, and he's out causing chaos every day, cycling. Traffic hate him, and I love him. Because I go, that's who I want to be. I want to take over from him. I want to be that 85-year-old who's still out there doing it and enjoying life. I have a thing, I don't know if you've ever had this, I've had it my whole life. If I see a hill, I immediately go, I'd love to run up that hill. I'd love to walk up that hill. I want to be on top of that hill. And what's best is that right there and then I might not be able to, but in principle I can. And it's happened several times. My youngest daughter will tell you it drives her mad. Because I'll be driving somewhere and I go, we're coming back for that one. And within a few weeks, I'll be, right, get in the car, and we go down, we go and explore a hill. You want to do that for life. And at some point, my children will have children. I don't want to be the granddad in a chair. I want to be the granddad who's wrestling them to the ground and chucking them in the swimming pool. So my aspirations are to live this life as well as I possibly can. And to do that, you have to maintain your muscle mass. Women in the room, age-related muscle changes impact you more than us. So you've really got to invest in it. It's not about going to the gym and being a bodybuilder. It's about just doing resistance work, utilizing your muscles, activating them. Cardiovascular efficiency will protect you your whole life. The easier it is to breathe, the easier it is to live. So everything we've discussed today in the context of sport, professional sport, elite sport, it's all about us. It's all about you. It's all about putting yourself in that small group so that actually, when I get there, when I am the long white bearded 85-year-old weirdo, I'm not on my own. I'm surrounded by non-normal people like you who think they're normal, but they're not. So that's everything I've got on sport in this talk. I hope it was useful. I hope it was enough to inspire you to think about things a different way. And we've literally got, if I have a look at it, 3 minutes to answer any questions that you might have. So well done, Col. I've reduced the stress of that. Hand up in the air straight away.
Yes, I have one question about this muscle protein synthesis. So what kind of signaling pathways this omega-3 is activating? You know, protein activates this mTOR and calories activate IGF-1 and these kind of things. So which way does omega-3 work?
I mean, you could get lost in discussing that particularly in this room, but effectively what you get consistently with a significant presence of omega-3 is you get an increase in anabolic signal and microbial activity across all pathways. So the calorific pathway is quite a crude pathway, as you'll know, because you clearly know something about it. It's a crude pathway and it exhausts itself. So this is why, going back to your comment, people in the kind of bulk up phase, that they will preempt a synthesis response by increasing calorific turnover and then by engaging in a stimulus that is sufficient enough to prompt a response. But that pathway becomes blunted quite quick and actually becomes quite exhausted on cycles. When you look at the presence of omega-3, regardless of the pathway and actually regardless of the training type, what you get is an expression of adaptation. The muscle trauma itself not only prompts the inflammation, which is multifaceted, but you get an increase of the anabolic microbe activity, which in itself then starts to signal at different parts of several pathways to increase in anabolic response. So it's not singular pathway, it's multi-pathway, and also it's non-exhaustive, because the calorific pathway is exhaustive. That's why most people who go to the gym, or most athletes, 18 months into a prescribed pathway, calorific pathways, total calorific, like when you start to look at energy yield, it exhausts itself. Protein, on the other hand, shows improvement consistently, but the magnitude of improvement decreases over time. And that's been wrongly attributed to the fact that there's a point at which unless you introduce ergogenic aids, you've reached this like natural maximal status. There's no evidence for that whatsoever. What happens in those instances is that over time we get a level of protein desensitivity. So the increased anabolic microbe pathway becomes less and less with every exposure. And people try to counteract that by taking more and more protein, but that taps out too. Thank you for that question though.
Hey, before your life with Zinzino, how was your omega-3 intake and how was your test result?
That's an interesting question. Because back then I was married. And it's interesting. Let me tell you why. Because there's this misconception that married couples have and families have, where they'll say, we eat this way. This is how we eat. And my wife at the time, she was a lead clinician. She managed the whole department. She still does. Managed the whole department for the NHS across 3 hospitals. And we have very different roles. So she was in a clinical setting every single day, and I was in the laboratories every single day, or lecturing, or working with a team. And then you'd come home and you'd have the same meal. My wife, she'd had 3 children. She was starting to get like low-level bruising. She had a few other issues going on, difficulty sleeping. She was perimenopausal. She'd love me saying all this. And we'd actually considered omega-3 supplement strategies for her because of we understood what its potential was. And nothing had worked. We tried stuff, nothing really worked, nothing had changed. And so Zinzino arrives. And actually for me, the key thing was I said to her, well, do this test, and then let's give this product a go. And my wife said to me, well, you've got a laboratory, so why don't we do the test in your lab and do this one, and we can really check it, and we'll both start taking it. So that's the only reason why I did the test. Otherwise, I wasn't interested. I was just going to start taking the product. So we did our test, and we sent it off, and I did the test in our lab, and you'd be happy to know that they came out really, really, really similar. And her test was terrible. Hers was like 25 something to 1. So hers was really, really bad. And mine was like 4.3 to 1. So I was just outside. But we'd been living with this fiction that we all ate the same. And so when this came back, don't get me wrong, there was some systemic changes. She was perimenopausal, she'd had 3 children, so there were things that were changed. But when I sat down, I was like, what are you eating at work? And I've worked in a hospital. And I don't know if you know this, but certainly in the UK, most physiotherapy departments are like 90% women. And you get different behaviours. And what I mean by that, it's very rare, tell me if I'm wrong, that a bloke, a man, comes in and says, right lads, I've made some cakes last night and I brought them in for everyone. It doesn't really happen that often. But it was a common feature for them. And they would take turns in it. And they had this thing on a Friday where they'd all take turns as to who was going to take a treat in. And when you start to add all this up, you go, our diets are nowhere near the same. You're going to work every day, and at break time you're having a chocolate biscuit with a coffee, or you're having a sandwich from the vending machine. And then 2 or 3 times a week someone's bringing in cakes and you're having a treat on. And there was none of that for us. None of that. And so, yeah, so mine was just outside. I think it was like 4.2 to 1, 4.1. Actually, Orion knows my score better than me because he goes around telling everyone. I think it was like 4.1, 4.2 to 1. But the person who I was sharing life with, under this notion that we all eat the same, was rocketed through. And so I started to take Zinzino, obviously. And for me, I don't know if we've got time for this, but I wanted to kind of test certain aspects of it. And I keep myself relatively fit, and I do enjoy running, and I've done lots of Ironmans and marathons and all this kind of stuff. And I'd noticed a bit of an improvement in sleep, and I think it was about, let's see, I started in the April taking it, so it would have been late August, September. I thought, right, I'm going to test it. And the reason why I wanted to test it, have I got time for this? I'd been going for runs, and I'd run a lot anyway, but I started to really notice that I don't really feel tired at all. Like I'd go for the run and come back and then have a drink of water and just like, kind of like almost the point where you go, I don't really feel like I've done anything. So this one day, I decided to test it, and we were still married, And I said to Tracy, right, I'm going to take some water and I'm going to run. And when I feel like I can't run anymore, I'm going to call you and just come and pick me up. And we'll go from, like, you know, I'm just going to see at the point where I really feel heavy-legged and tired and I just can't run anymore. And so I set off, running, everything's right, got my own water. And I remember it distinctly, I took 2 bottles, so I had like 1.5 litres. And I don't drink a lot when I'm running anyway. So I got to the 3-hour point and I had no water left. So I knocked at a house. I said, can you fill the water up? And I got these water things filled up again, and I set back off, and I was getting a bit slower, but I didn't feel sore, or I didn't have that thing, you know, where you think, oh, I can't do this anymore. So I kept going, and I emptied them too. But now it was I've been running for nearly 6 hours, and I was just like, all that's going to happen now is I'm going to keep going until it's devastating. And then I won't be able to walk tomorrow, and it was a Sunday and I had to go to work. So I called her, told her where I was. And even when I was waiting for her to pick me up, I was like, you've quit too early. You could have kept going here. You could have kept going. So she picked me up, went home, had a bath, relaxed, all the rest of it. And I thought, I'm going to pay for this tomorrow. And I woke up the next day and I was like, oh, I could tell I've run, but I'm all right. And then have you heard of a thing, all you sports people, called second day onset? Have you heard of that? So the first day you go, wow, I got away with that. And then the second day you go, oh my God, I was hit by a truck. So all day I was in work and I was like, it's going to get me tomorrow. And I kept stopping and stretching and going, it's going to get me tomorrow. And then I woke up the next day and there was nothing. I mean, and literally, so in this like 6 hours that I'd gone, I'd run the best part of 58 kilometers. And I'd emptied 3 litres of water, went back, had a bath, stretched, ate something, had a normal day Monday. On the Tuesday, I thought, right, I don't feel tired, so I'll test it. And I ran a PB in my 10K. I ran a 37:18 PB on my 10K. So, it even helped me. That was a few years ago now. I can't do sub 40 10Ks anymore unless I throw up at the end. And no one wants to see that. That was a long way. See what happens if you ask the wrong question? You don't get a coffee break. Thank you, folks. I'm going to save my voice because now we're going to do health, aren't we?
Thank you, Colin. What a wonderful, inspiring lecture. Hei, kuunnelkaa hetki vielä, please. Eli nyt on tauko. Tässä on taululla www.madetomove.uk löytyy Colinin kirja. Käykää ihmeessä tilaamassa. Siellä on siis ihan fantastinen, todella viihdyttävä, täynnä asiaa. Erittäin hyvä, suositeltava. Nyt on tauko. Jatketaan. Ne, jotka tulee seuraavalle luennolle, niin jatketaan puolen tunnin kuluttua. Tauko on tuossa toisessa kerroksessa, saa kahvia. Tai voi mennä ulos haukkaamaan raitista ilmaa, siellä on nätti kevätilma. Ottakaa kamat mukaan täältä ja tyhjennetään tämä huone. Kiitos.